Create content that attracts, converts, and keeps your ideal clients. This is Content Sells. Hi, you're listening to the Content Sells podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 174. I'm Suzi Dafnis. Here with me is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Hi, Suzi. I am good. How are you?
I am great because actually just as we are recording, I am about to do the very thing that we're talking about here in this episode. And it's something that's made a massive difference to me this year and last year since I introduced this into my flow. And that's this idea of taking a clear week.
I love this idea, and I'm interested in this episode too, because I know you've told me about what you're doing, but I want to hear more about the detail of it because I'm fascinated, and I know how much you've been enjoying it.
And like a lot of people, right? It's just so easy to fill the calendar with events and commitments and meetings and product launches and whatever all that is. And what a clear week is kind of like what it sounds like. It's a week that I clear in my schedule, but it's not a vacation week and it's not me doing nothing. It's just a week that's clear of noisy or busy work. So that includes appointments that can wait. It includes anything that requires me to be doing outward facing work. I guess that's the best way to talk. So I'm not presenting, I'm not delivering, I'm not doing anything outward facing. It's very much an internal focus sort of week. So there's no real busy work. This is where I plan, I write if I need to write, and I clear it not only for me, but what happens when I clear it for me is that it's also clear for our events coordinator. It's also clear in some ways for the team because we're all part of this production cycles. But here's the thing about the clear week. It's very strategically placed in the year. And the first place that I pop a clear week is usually after a big promotion. Because what I've noticed is that burnout can happen, especially, well, I know for me, and you might know this from yourself as well, Michelle, is that when I go from project to project without a break, when I go from one campaign to the next, even if they're small campaigns or large campaigns, I can start to get totally exhausted and depleted. And so can my team. And so I'm not functioning at my highest level. So after a big promotion, I schedule a clear week. So that for me happens after we open the doors to our membership. It often happens after we run our 2-day mastermind program. It runs after we do our Her Business Live event. So these are projects that have had a lot of work leading up to them. And what I want to avoid is getting off the back of this big project and going into a week where I'm very much out there. I've got Facebook Lives, I'm interviewing people, I'm doing a lot of delivery, for lack of a better word, and have a lot of commitments that take me in or out of the office. And so I definitely put one after a big campaign, but I don't do nothing. Like I don't go on a vacation, unfortunately. But I do things like I analyze what just happened. What worked? What would we do again? What would I not? I look at the statistics. I reconnect with my team. What do we need to do to wrap this project up? What just happened? Can we all get a bit of a breather and have some space? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Sorry, I had myself on mute because I didn't want to interrupt you. It totally makes sense. And I love what you're saying about looking back because we don't give ourselves that time to look back. We're on to the next thing. And so much of what we can learn by looking back.
Yeah. And when it's right after that big promotion, my memory I can still remember all the things. Yeah. And so I look at, what we could do differently. And so for you, as you're listening, it could be right after opening your membership or launching your book and doing an in-store promotion or creating that lead magnet and getting it out in the world or running an online summit or putting out a ton of proposals for work. But these clear weeks aren't only after a big surge of output. It's also essential to schedule them before a really busy period. So for me, a few weeks out from one of our main events, I'm scheduling a clear week so that I'm on top of the project planning. So I'm still reflecting at that point, but what I'm doing is looking at, okay, at this moment in time, here we are a few weeks out from this really busy period. Are all our ducks in a row? Has the team been briefed? Are our project tasks and actions, are they all up to date? Are we giving ourselves the best chance of success? If we were going to change something from the last time we did it to this time, have we actually done that? What does that look like? And so that's a few weeks before a big promotion. And when I look at our calendar year, it ends up that I tend to schedule a clear week about every 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks. But generally, every 4 to 6 weeks, there'll be a week, in my calendar that is a clear week. And that sounds like a lot of time. That sounds like a lot of time to carve out of the year. But here's what I know. If I give myself those clear weeks, and it's a clear week for the team as well, and, everyone who I'm accountable to knows that I'm having a clear week, it becomes such a precious headspace time that we as leaders, we really need, and we don't give ourselves that time. And I know that not only do I appreciate the clear weeks now, but my team does as well, because it's that point of pause to either envision forward or to reflect back. And I want to be my best all the time for my customers and my team. And for me, setting this up has made such a big difference, Michelle, because it really refreshes me. It gives me back my life force, and it allows me to move on from one project and onto the other with more clarity, feeling more rejuvenated. And this is a better outcome for everyone than me being a shell of myself, going from project to project and not having any of that downtime. But again, this isn't a point where I'm on vacation. This is a point where I am resetting. So it is so important, right? Because we go from one thing to the other and we're always busy. But here's the trick that I found, and this is my second year of doing these in this very deliberate way and teaching women inside the Her Business Network to do this, is that as I'm planning the New Year's activity, I'm also scheduling the clear weeks. So they're not a last minute thing. I will look at January and I'll look at February and I'll look at the activities and go, okay, I need a clear week somewhere in here. What needs to move? And so right now, as we are, episode's going to air the middle of December, we have already scheduled my clear weeks for the next year based on what promotions we're running throughout the year.
Yeah, you're not having to muscle them in to an already full calendar. They're kind of some of the things that are going in first. I love it.
Yeah, and they're very precious, and I don't step over them. And so if there's an opportunity for me to be on a podcast or to be at a speaking event, I'm going to think very, very deeply before I surrender one of those weeks. If I can move it a couple of days forward and back to fit something else in that is on track with something I want to do, great. Otherwise, I don't. Like, I'm not recording podcasts, I'm not doing it. So then I have to get other stakeholders, on board with that idea as well, that, this is a clear week. And so we need to protect that time. And so it's become something, as I said, that as we're speaking, we're very much in the planning mode inside of the Her Business community. So I'm teaching our members about this idea as well. And I'm just dogged. I've become dogged about it because I know the value of doing that and having that time, just creating more space in our lives and our schedules, I think is something that we could all do more of.
Yeah. And I know when I have a friend, somebody that's doing something that's really working and they sort of share it with me, my ears prick up because, we try lots of things and not everything works. But when, as you have explained to me, this has made a real difference to your life. Like, it's a real significant practical thing that you're doing that's actually really working. And we can hear about theories and strategies and all these things that kind of make good sense in kind of theoretical land. But I think when somebody's saying, hey, this is the second year I've done this and I'm doing it again next year, and it's making a massive difference to my productivity, to my ability to sustain what I'm doing, to bring my best self, that's when we should all be leaning forward and say, Suzi, tell us more.
Yeah, so that's helpful. I hope that's helpful to those listening. Because like I said, I kind of swear by it, and it's allowed me to just produce better results because I'm taking the time to, before a big project, get really clear, okay, are all our ducks in a row? Are we going? And then, we put the pedal to the metal. And then after it going, okay, what happened? Before this all dissipates and we're, neck deep in another project, where are we at? What needs to be finalized? What little, bows need to be wrapped up, and, what needs to happen to close this project off before we move on to the next thing. So, so that's my thing.
No, I love it. I particularly like what you said about at first you thought it seemed really indulgent to take that much time. And I think what you're telling us, what I'm hearing is, you know what, that time's actually, you get a huge return on investment in that time. And I think that's something I see a lot where we look at something, we think, gosh, really, I'm going to just cancel all my appointments, or I'm not going to do any Facebook Lives that week, or I'm not going to, you know, do this meeting, or, you know, be on that particular scheduled call. But actually creating that space absolutely pays off. And it reminds me of a book that we've actually shared in our reading list called Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, definitely recommend that you check it out. But we will give you some of the highlights today as well. And he talks a lot about creating this space in our lives to do the deep work, to do the work that we probably push off until another time. And yet it's the deep work, the new product idea, the review of the last campaign to see, oh my gosh, we just put all this money into Facebook ads and half of the ads don't work. And now I see why. We can make it different next time. This deep thinking is where we move the lever in our business. And so I just wanted to pick out a couple of things from this book, which I just love this book. And he talks about this idea of multitasking, you know, the busy work that you were talking about, Suzi, where, you know, in the morning you might do a Facebook Live and then you're off approving some emails and then you go and hop onto a podcast session with me, or you answer some questions in the mastermind Facebook group, or whatever might be happening in your day. While that multitasking is necessary for a lot of us in a busy business, we need to have times when we're not multitasking, because multitasking, believe it or not, is actually an enemy of productivity. And this is a study that Cal quotes in his book. And it was a study by Sophie Leroy. She's a business professor at the University of Minnesota. And she researched this back in 2009. And she said, when we switch from task A to task B, our attention tends to stay on task A, which means we can only half focus on task B. And of course, makes sense, right? That's going to hurt our performance. And her experiments utilized two groups. Group A worked on a word puzzle until she interrupted them to go on reading resumes and make some hypothetical hiring decisions. So imagine this, she's got them doing this word puzzle, they're trying to crack a code or whatever it is, and then she comes in and interrupts them and says, hey, here's some resumes. Can you read these and tell me who you'd hire for this hypothetical job? So that's group A. Group B, she let them do the word puzzles until they were finished. And then they said, okay, I'm finished the word puzzles. And they said, great, would you please read these resumes now and tell me who you'd hire? So you kind of got the gist of the experiment. And in between the two tasks, she would give the people a quick test to see how many keywords from the puzzles were still stuck in their minds, okay? So group A, when she did this test, was still much more focused on the puzzle and therefore less focused on that important task of hiring the right person than group B was. And that's because group B got to finish that task. It was no longer an open loop. And we've talked about open loops on this show before. It's using them in our marketing is really powerful. When there's an open loop, something that's half finished, people want to finish it and it stays top of mind until it gets closed, until that loop gets closed. It's why cliffhangers in TV shows work so well. I want to know what happened at the end of that show, so I'll keep thinking about it until next week when the show comes back.
That's so interesting, because I understand the idea of multitasking. I've got multiple things going on at once, but I think another level of that, tell me what you think, is like I'm checking my Slack messages and then I'll jump into the Facebook group and answer a few member inquiries, and then I will look at some emails, and I'm sort of going from one thing to the next. And then I might circle back and just check. Like, that's not multitasking because they are sort of independent, but it feels still like there's lots of different things that I'm cycling through rather than spending, like, say, I don't know, another way would be like I do emails only in the morning, or I do Slack only in the afternoon, which is just not practical. But do you know, would you still consider that multitasking?
Well, it's if you don't complete the task, like if you kind of say, right, I'm going to
Slack for me, will you?
Oh my God, that's never finished, right? But like I know myself, I sometimes get into these crazy loops where I'm like, I'm halfway through an email, but then my phone flashes and I realize that somebody sent me a text. So I start to write the text and then my kids come in and ask me something. And then like suddenly I've got 50 things half done. And no wonder I feel stressed because I'm dealing with the anxiety that is naturally produced in all of us when we have open loops, when we have incomplete tasks. And so there's that going on. And then there's another part of what I think you're talking about there, which is distraction. You know, like I have to really be disciplined when I say I'm going to write something. Part of me, even before I even realize it, is back over checking Facebook. You know, because you can get those quick wins. I can answer somebody's question in the mastermind and feel like I'm making progress, and I am, but I'm, biting away at this precious couple of hours that I had blocked out to do this deep work with no distractions, with no multitasking, with no cycling through multiple things that divide my energy and attention units up. And so I think it's a balance because it's, we've got to send the Slack messages and answer the text messages and talk to our team and that's all part and parcel. And I think what's so great about what you've done, Suzi, with the Clear Weeks is you've been really deliberate about carving out time where you're not in the busyness of your business.
And because when I go from doing a Facebook Live to checking my Slack to doing my email, like email Slack, like they never finish. Commenting, replying on Facebook comments, it's not a task that you can go, yep, I'm all done. Kind of, you might be caught up for a second, but it's one of those thankless. As much as I, love to and need to sort of do it, it's kind of thankless. But, finishing writing that sales page or finishing that email sequence or that campaign thinking, that has rewards that only come when you can give yourself the time to do them. And so this is just an interesting conversation. And I love that you reminded us of that study and that, we think we've moved on, but no, part of our brain is still there because there's an incomplete cycle. There's something that wasn't resolved and how that sucks away at our energy. It's fascinating.
And, the other thing that I really love about Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, is he talks about 4 ways that we can give ourselves opportunities for this deep work. And so, Suzi, your Clear Week is actually one of the 4 ways that he talks about, which I know you're aware of. And so I'll just give you for our listeners, a quick rundown of what these 4 ways are. The first is the monastic approach. And I do mean as in monk, monastic. And he says this strategy works by eliminating all sources of distraction and secluding yourself like a monk. And I know, sometimes I've hired a little holiday house or something to go and do a piece of work, or Mark's taken the kids somewhere for the day so I can have, complete quiet while I work on a project. And maybe as you're listening, you're thinking about times when you've taken that monastic approach where you've eliminated all those sources of distraction and found a way to seclude yourself, like those monks that secluded themselves and, did all their deep work. The second is what he calls the bimodal approach, which involves setting a clearly defined long period of seclusion for work and leaving the rest of your time free for everything else. The third is the rhythmic approach. The idea here is to form a habit of doing deep work for blocks of time in your day. So your day has a kind of rhythm to it. So say 90 minutes to do some deep work, and then you go on to doing some of the busy work, and you use your calendar to sort of track that. And then finally, the last is the journalistic strategy, and that's to take any unexpected free time in your routine to do deep work. I don't think that one would work for me. I don't know whether any time would open up. But regardless of which technique you employ, he says it's key to remember that they're methodical, not random. You cannot just sort of expect, I'll just do deep work and somehow or other I'll automatically find myself in a holiday house writing my book. You have to be quite deliberate about it.
I love this, and I feel like I've done all of them. I have to say I feel like the monastic is the one that I do least. Like I know there's people who they lock themselves away for 3 days and they write a book. If only. I don't have the attention span, or I haven't created that, that way is a way for me to do. So I tend to, I think, use the bimodal approach, which is that setting a period of time of seclusion and then leaving that time for free. And also, I think the rhythmic approach, like I might get up early and I'll spend 90 minutes working on putting together a campaign or a presentation, and then I'll do the more rats and mice things, The journalistic, I feel like I don't know that I can go deep at that sort of just pivot to deep so quickly. But here's the thing, whichever your approach is, this deep work is the work that we really should be doing more of as business owners. This is the work that really moves the needle. And whether it's with your content marketing or developing a sales funnel, getting people up your marketing mountain, it takes this sort of focus. And one of the things that I just wanted to add is I find to do any deep work, I need to be rested. Otherwise, I can't get into it. And I found myself this morning, I'm so grateful that we had today booked to do some podcast recording because I could stay single-minded and focused on this work. Otherwise, because I'm physically fatigued, the idea of doing deep work makes me just want to cry because it's like I can't get there from here. So for me, being rested will allow me to then structure my day to take, whether it's the 60 minutes or the carve out the morning or to have the monastic point of view. And I can really trip myself up by thinking that I'm going to fit deep work into a smaller time slot or on a weekend. And I have gotten better at this, but I still fall into the trap sometimes where I need to do some deep work and I think I'll just do that on the weekend when there's no distractions. And what happens is I get to the weekend and I'm tired, or I want to spend time with family and friends, or I want to have a glass of wine, and then that deep work doesn't happen. And then, then it's like, but look at next week. When am I going to squeeze this in? And one of the things that I found, though, does support it is changing my environment. So one is rest. The other is changing my environment. And you mentioned the beach house. And for me, I do find it easier to do deep work when I get away from my desk, and even if I'm sitting at the dining table, like I go to a physical location called an office, but if I want to do deep work, what I might do is I'll work from the dining room table, and it's a different environment. I have a different outlook. So they're just a couple of the ways that I hack it. One, sleep first. Sleep first, then go deep. And two is changing my environment.
They're such great tips. And, so easy to do too. Just simply get up from your desk and go to the dining room table and just kind of give yourself different mental cues, environmental cues as well. I tend to take a blend, like you. The rhythmic approach is definitely something that I do to create deep work. And for many, many, many years, I did all my deep work in the morning between like 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. I really love to get up early. But what's been happening in the last few years, and I've mentioned this to you before, I think, Suzi, that because I do so much work in the US and we're in Australia, and so a lot of the meetings, that busy work that I would much rather do like after lunch or after 10 a.m., I have to do in that early time slot, 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. meetings, because that's when it's daylight hours in the US. And I've really noticed I've had to rejig a little bit of my process, and it hasn't come naturally to me because that 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. has always been my really productive time. And I was a pumpkin at night. But what's been happening to me lately, Suzi, is I've been working and finding these really interesting second wins around 8 till midnight, which is so not me. I'm just not a night owl. And doing a bit of a nap and then a bit of a nana nap in the afternoon.
Good.
So I do some meetings in the morning, then have, kind of do some of the busy work that's follow up from that, have a little break, have a sleep, and then dinner with the family. And then I'll go back to it afterwards and do the deep work then when everybody else is watching their gory Korean drama or whatever is on the television. So that's a new thing for me, but it's still the rhythmic approach, right? There is still this chunk of time in my day that I say, look, intentionally, I'm not doing the rats and mice kind of activities. And I have a colleague who does the same thing. She's got a multi-million-dollar business, and she credits the success of that business. Like, she was sort of struggling along, and the minute she made this one change, her business sort of took off. And it is this idea that she doesn't take meetings until after 1 p.m. in the day. Everything before 1 p.m. is her time. Everything before 1 p.m. is product creation, working on things that require deep work. And she is religious about it. It's sort of how you've got to be with your clear weeks. Once you do it and you see how valuable they are, you become protective of them. And she knows how valuable this is. And so she is just, and because she's been doing it for years, everybody in her team knows that's how it is. And it just naturally happens. There's no resistance. And that's the light I want to put at the end of the tunnel for somebody who's hearing this. This may feel hard to start with, or awkward, or people around you may even push back, or you may push back. But if you just can find a way to keep doing this and keep holding the line on this, it will actually just become the new normal. And I just cannot stress to you how important it is to give yourself this time and this space.
I really like that, what you said about other people might push back. And so we really have to hold strong, but also to really back ourselves and not do things that might sabotage ourselves. And as business owners, ultimately, we get to choose. Like Michelle gets to choose to work from 4 to 8 and then 8 till midnight and sleep in the middle of the day. We get to choose. But sometimes it doesn't feel like that. It feels like, the tail is wagging the dog. And so being deliberate about that, being very clear, it does take a little bit of courage, and to say, the world's not going to fall apart if I'm not doing it the way I've always done it. But I get it. I get it. Especially if you have a team of people and they're there, they expect you to be there at a particular time or doing a particular thing. But, like the example you gave with your client saying, I don't take meetings till after 1, people will get to know. She doesn't take meetings till after 1. So, we just build the business around that. And being able to make those choices, I think, is a luxury that we have as business owners. So why not? Why not just do that? I wanted to say also just around those modes, for me, I just know myself personally, and spending more than, say, 90 minutes to 2 hours on something, it's just not my mode. I get fidgety, and I know, Michelle, you can go into really long periods of creation. I just need to be able to take a break at that point and find another 2-hour period, a 90-minute period. So it's trying it out and seeing what works for you, but giving yourself those opportunities to go deep, whatever mode from the 4, or maybe you have a hybrid from what the author suggested, that's going to work for you.
And, you were saying the monastic approach, that doesn't work for you at all. But for me, it does, because I tend to be, like you said, I can go so deep into a project. I'm a hyper focuser. I can forget I have a body, which is not good, right? Because you've got to get up and walk around, and you've got to eat and drink and all those things. But I have to sometimes, when I know I'm going deep into a project, I set alarms. And those alarms say, have a shower. Eat, go to bed. Like, I have to be that explicit with myself, because I just know that when I'm really focused on a project, deep in quite a complex creation, where you're holding like 50 million different things in your mind at once, that I can really lose sense of time. And so while that's a good thing in some ways, because you can get some deep work done, and in a day you can use 8 hours of those days on highly creative work, it also means you need to stay healthy. You need to get up, you need to walk around and all those things. So I've had to learn to manage that. But all my life I've had those monastic periods where I take large chunks of time out of my calendar. And there have been even periods of time where I've worked really hard for a couple of years, and then I've had like a year off or gone traveling for extended periods of time. And I just love that sort of intensity either way. And I do try and take at least a month off every year, although in the last couple of years it's been a bit manic and we haven't been able to travel. So that hasn't happened as much, but I'm about to take 2 months off, and not for any specific outcome. Like, it's not like I'm taking 2 months off to write a book or to build a house or anything like that. The only outcome for me is some deep thinking And you used the word earlier, Suzi, resetting and percolating.
I'm envious. I think I've got a period of about 3 weeks where that I am going dark, just going low, I wanted to say one more thing about the monastic period, and that is that I think that last time I did that was when I sold my business. I felt like I had a good reason to just sit and create the next sort of chapter of my life. But we shouldn't have to wait for those big moments. We can put them into our year. Like you said, you're about to take, the best part of 2 months off. And one of the things is that the type of business we have, right? So we can have any sort of business. And I know for the last 27 years, I've chosen a business where there's always a freight train coming towards me called the next event that we're running. And because we're an events-based, we have a calendar that's scheduled, a year in advance, there's always something coming towards me. And so for me, it's been about becoming better at scheduling those activities, knowing that they're immovable. Once we put that calendar out there and people are committed to a program, like our mastermind program where things have to happen on a particular day, is that I design that they're very deliberately designed. And that they're designed not off the cuff, but that's a deep piece of work. What is my next 12 months going to look like? What is going to happen and in what order and when and how much time between them? And am I going to do this content campaign 5 times? Am I going to do it 3 times and give myself more of a runway because I'm going to need some deeper time because, I want to rewrite that program, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot in this conversation, of deep work and clearing space and creating more space in our lives, so that we can go deep. So thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too. And I really think it's about what works for you. So if you're listening to this and, you say, well, I'm more like this or that, it's perfectly fine. However you want to do it, it's just about finding the rhythm that works. Regular breaks, longer breaks, some sort of plan for each day. Just having the commitment, though, to create that clear space is where it's at.
Definitely doing that in 2022, creating some clear space. And again, I know we need to sort of finish up this episode and we've probably said enough, but I notice sometimes I feel a little guilty about taking extra space.
Yep.
So there might be someone out there that speaks to as well. But regardless, I'm designing next year to be better than this year, which was better than the year before, and so sometimes it's a matter of backing out of the business that we've designed and the schedule we've designed to create it better. And that can take time as well. We would love to know what you're going to do to create space in your business, what deep work looks like for you. And the way to get in touch with us is through our Facebook page. So we have a Facebook page specifically for the Content Sales Podcast. And if you search inside of Facebook for Content Sales Podcast, you'll find us. And so let us know. Do you have a clear week? Are you going to take that on board? Are you going to grab the book and read it? Do you have a preference on the different styles, the 4 different styles that we talked about? So, so definitely let us know. Find us on the Facebook page. The other thing that I want to say before we wrap up is I wanted to let you know that I am going to give you a link in just a moment where you can find more information about the things that we've been talking about. But before we do that, I wanted to thank one of our listeners, the lovely Jane McLaren, who posted, we recently had a birthday episode. It was our 6th birthday as a podcast, and Jane left this message over on our Facebook page. She said, "Happy birthday," and a little balloon emoji. "You have provided some of the most useful podcasts I've ever listened to. Thank you." I know. How good is that? Yeah.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you so much, Jane. And we would love it if you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the show, if you would leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts is the big kahuna. That's the one that people generally go to find a new podcast. And so we would love your endorsement there with a review, and we will give you a shout out here on the show. Be sure to tell us your company name because we will give that a shout out as well. So as I said, we have resources that we may have mentioned here today that we want to make sure you get access to. And so what we've done is we've created a page on our website where you can go for more info. And that page is at herbusiness.com/clear, herbusiness.com/clear, CLEAR. Michelle, what do we have coming up in the next episode, which is, I believe, the final episode for the year?
It absolutely is. And as is our tradition for the last few years, one of our most favorite episodes, we're going to be talking about books, our book recommendations for 2022. So that's some of the books we've read this year. We'll be updating the famous Content Sells reading list so you can get the latest update on all the books that we've been recommending over the years. And we'll be sharing our top picks for 2022 in the next episode.
So that's coming up 2 weeks from now. If you don't already subscribe to the show, be sure to hit that subscribe button to make sure you get that episode when it drops. Michelle, anything you want to say before we go today?
I want to thank you, Suzi, for sharing your clear week idea. It's inspirational. I'm starting to think, how do I do that? And I really loved in particular how strategic you are about putting them right after a big sort of creative output or a big project. I'm going to take that and figure out how to make that happen for 2022 for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. We've loved having you here. We love making this show for you. We'll see you next time right here on the Content Sells podcast. Bye for now.